All right. I love my next guest, not in, that kind of sense, but I love having him on. And I know you do too, because the chat box goes berserk and so do emails into the program. If you'd like to have a word with the one and only Jim Ball, by all means, jump on our talkback lines from Australia and New Zealand, 1800 670 310, from the UK 033024 1026, and from the US and Canada 1888 201 6425. Jim Ball is a former nighttime talkback host at 2UE and 2GB, broadcasting to a national audience, and we love having him on. Jim Ball, Happy New Year to you.
And you too, Chris. I think I've been on once before this year.
We were on last week. You were
3rd
too.
of January. Yeah, that's right.
Yes,
yeah.
I forgot all about that. That's what happens when you have fun. You forget
I
all
must
of
say,
it.
I got to tell you, this summer, normally this time of year it's dead.
Yeah.
But this summer it's really alive. It's great if you're a news junkie.
Yeah,
or a political junkie.
Correct. In the United States,
yep.
Here in Australia, no natural disasters, but plenty of news to talk about.
There's something like 40 elections over the next 12 months around the world. 40.
Wow.
40,
massive.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Woolies and Aldi. They've just turned on our National Day. One of our listeners have just told us they've dropped on the ASX by 55 cents. But it reminds us too, and we forget about this, of their ownership allegiances. Woolies and Aldi are not Australian, are they?
Look, I'm not quite sure what the shareholding is, but I know Aldi's German. Woolies,
yep.
I assume that there's a big Australian shareholding involved. What I find interesting in this is, superficially, it's very easy to be triggered and outraged by the whole business. And rightly so. Woolworths, they've dropped the mask of being the fresh food friendly people to an un-Australian outfit, as you mentioned, Wokeworths. And quite frankly, I think the average Australian is sick to death of being lectured on social policies and social issues by the big corporates. They got their ass kicked in October on the 14th, right?
Well, they didn't learn.
No, they're slow learners. But the interesting thing about it is that, why do this 2 weeks and make a big deal out of it 2 weeks prior to Australia Day? Why not just, we're not doing it anymore, you don't tell anyone, it just doesn't happen. It was almost like it was a deliberate poke in the eye to the average consumer. I can't think of why you would do it unless you were looking for some cheap publicity. It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Robert on the chat box says Coles is an Australian-born company, Wesfarmers, of course.
Yes.
Aldi is German, and if you look in Mr. Google or Miss Google, Woolworths International Australia is a wholly owned subsidiary of the South African-based Woolworths Holdings Limited.
Yeah. Here's the thing. They think nothing of selling merch for Halloween. There's the, I think it's Hindu Light Festival, Diwali or something like that.
Yeah.
But Australia Day, I mean, not the biggest event in Australia's year, but the coming together, with the exception of a few naysayers, the average Australian looks forward to Australia Day. It's kind of it's built into you from mother's milk, from when you're a child.
Yep.
Australia Day, it's part of summer, 26th of January, 1788 and all of that.
Yeah.
And I just think that they've made a wrong call. Look, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt, and here it is, that the average Australian probably has their Australia Day merch. They bought it 5, 6, 7 years ago, and they don't need to buy any new thongs or hats or towels or whatever. And they've probably got it, and Woolworths put that out every year, and it doesn't sell. So they decided that, well, what's the point? Everyone's got their Australia Day. Yeah, that's being kind about it, giving them the benefit of the doubt. But you look at it in the context of, I think it's 77 councils that are now no longer doing Australia Day ceremonies.
Yeah.
There's at times of the year where various councils or public utilities don't fly the Australian flag. They lower it in favour of the Aboriginal flag. Then the whole thing looks like part of an entire multi-pronged attack on one of our one of our icon days. It just looks like it's part of that ongoing campaign to delegitimize Australia Day.
But what do they want? Like, should we take away what colonialism has brought to this country? Should we take away our hospitals? Should we take away our legal framework?
System.
So therefore, take away the courts, take away police.
Yep.
Maybe we should take away hot and cold running water.
Well, we're talking the corpus of Western civilization and British law and all those things.
And give everything back to the Indigenous people.
Say, here you go.
Here you go.
It's your turn.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. All of those people that are bitching and whinging and moaning about this stuff, all of them were born, I would suspect, around about, post-World War II. There'd be a few that are much older. They have lost nothing. I keep hearing about, what's been stolen from us. Nothing has been stolen from you. The ones who I think we're coming to it later will be the people in the remote regions and areas. But those that are doing the moaning about it, they have lost absolutely nothing, and they are just beating it up for their own personal political gain.
Spot on. Now, Tony from Stanmore...
By the way, Kmart, I believe they started all of this. They no longer stock Australia Day stuff either. Then it was Aldi, then now it's Woolies.
And then the knock-on. Right, okay.
Yep.
Tony from Stanmore in Sydney has sent us an email. Chris, I've been to a couple of shops to stock up on Australian Day merchandise. See, that's the other thing. You do something like this, people become contrasuggestible, and they may not have planned to go out and get their Australia Day thongs or their flags, but they're going to go and do that now.
Just to stick one up them,
Just to stick it up them. And he says, P.S., when Jim Ball is on, I have a ball. There you go. You got a fan there.
Haven't heard that before.
No, not much, not many times. Now I want to get to Siv's call, who's on our talkback lines. He wants to take us to the American GOP presidential race. Siv, welcome.
G'day. I did want to take you there, but just a brief word on that whole the whole Woolworths thing. Look, I think a lot of this is. We've got a bunch of Australian Marxists doing a lot of this. We've got a bunch of Australian Marxists in the corporate world or the political world doing all this. They've repackaged Marxism, and a lot of these people are about breaking their eggs to make their omelettes. And even if you don't follow politics, even if you don't consume it, somehow I think average Australia instinctively knows what these people are about, and they don't want any truck with it. So I'm glad to see that people are... Yeah, go.
Leon Trotsky, years ago, he was part of the Russian Revolution in 1917. He made the point, and I often use it in things that I write. He said, look, you may not be interested in politics, but politics is interested in you. So people may say, I don't listen to politics. Well, that's too bad, because everything you do, everything you plan on doing, everything you've done, there's a political element to it. You probably don't realise it, and you don't think of it through that prism, that lens. But everything is politics, whether you like it or not.
I'd agree with that entirely. Now, just on the
hey, listen, Siv, before you move on to that other topic involving the presidential race, can I just say something to both of you on the same topic? This is what has been posted today by the Queensland MP, federal MP, Bob Katter, the independent MP. And we know how much of a proud Australian he is. On the basis of this email, the day will come when the Anzac Day parade will be banned.
Yep.
RSLs will close and Australian soldiers will wear a different uniform. He says, my great-great-great-grandfather watched as his friends died in the Boer War. My grandfather watched and bled as his friends died in World War I and II. My grandfather watched as his friends and brothers died in the Depression of 32. My father watched as his friends died in Korea. I watched my friends die in Vietnam, East Timor and Desert Storm. Our sons and daughters watched and bled as their friends died in Afghanistan and Iraq. None of them died for the Afghanistan and Iraq flag. Every Australian died for the Australian flag. As the Victorian high school foreign students raised a Middle East flag on a school flagpole, Australian students took it down. Guess who the ex-students were? West Australian high school students were sent home because they wore T-shirts with the Australian flag printed on them. Enough is enough, he says. This message needs to be viewed by every Australian, and every Australian needs to stand up for Australia. We're bent over to appease long enough. I'm taking a stand. I'm standing up because of the hundreds of thousands who died fighting the wars for this country and for the Australian flag. And shame on anyone who tries to make this a racist message. Australians, stop giving away your rights. This is our country. This statement does not mean I'm against immigration. You are welcome here in my country. Welcome to come legally, get a sponsor, learn the language, get a job, pay your taxes. If you don't want to afford this for fear of offending someone, then you're part of the problem. We've gone so far the other way, bent over backwards not to offend anyone. Only Australians seem to care when Australian citizens are being offended. Wake up, Australia. If you do not pass this on, may your fingers cramp. There you go. There's Bob Catter for you.
Good old Bob.
He says it. He says it well.
Yeah, Sid, what did you want to say?
Yeah, briefly, just on the GOP thing. What do you make of all the stuff going on with the Republicans? Do you think in the end Donald Trump will win, or do you think all of his legal troubles are going to have some impact? Because I know you've got all these squishy Republicans like Haley and the rest, jockeying for position.
Haley reminds me of a goody two-shoes schoolgirl who wants to be the head prefect and the hall monitor, and she's sucking up. I mean, just her whole body language reeks of that description I just made. That's on her. Look, Trump, I think, I'm 100% certain will get the nomination for the Republicans. Now, we, quite frankly, don't know who the Democrat candidate will be. One thing is for sure, I don't think, well, here's me saying it's for sure and I don't think. What I mean is, I don't think it'll be Joe Biden. I think he'll get ditched. And a wild suggestion by Vivek Ramaswamy the other day was that he'll get ditched, and guess who will be inserted? Not Michelle Obama, Nikki Haley.
Oh, yeah, because they know that they can beat Nikki Haley. They can beat. That's why the Democrats are pushing for her to win. They can actually beat Nikki Haley, and they can't do anything about Trump.
As far as Trump's legal problems go, look, who knows? I think the one in Georgia now is looking really shaky because of what's happened with that Fannie Willis.
Yeah.
And she was screwing the prosecutor and she was paying him $1 million, and he was using the money to duchess her around the world on cruises to the Caribbean. And so it's looking really, really dodgy. The New York one, Letitia James, that one, I reckon that'll get overturned on appeal. And even the Jack Smith one is looking a little shaky as well. So, and quite frankly, Trump can still run as president, even if he's in jail. There's nothing stopping that at all. So look, it's all up in the air. Whenever I read about the latest poll, I turn the page because really we don't, it's 10, 11 months out.
Yeah. Good on you, Siv. We've lost him anyway. Siv, thank you very much for being part of the program. A couple of quick comments from viewers who are on the chat box. Nev says, the major shareholders of Woolworths and Coles are internationalists and couldn't care less about Australia. Ben Ducci, the CEO of Woolworths, is just a sock puppet taking orders. Chris writes, Woolworths, Aldi and Kmart are doing what their hedge fund investors have told them in the implementation of DEI and ESG and CRT. This comes from Larry Fink and BlackRock. It is going exactly down that path, isn't it, Jim?
Absolutely. I wrote a piece on this earlier this week about Fink and BlackRock and how that whole, it was yesterday on the super funds, how the super funds in Australia are becoming very, very powerful. And I said, whenever I read about the super funds in this particular article, I think Larry Fink and BlackRock and how they are trying to change behavior, force change of behavior. He's actually said that on television. They're about forcing behavior change.
Let's extend our little segment because there are a couple of other issues, one involving Indigenous control in West Australia and also the ABC that I want to get to you about. So we'll take a break now and come back with Jim Ball and Chris Smith on TNT.
Thanks for listening and being a part of the Chris Smith Show on today's News Talk Radio, TNT.
Chris doesn't even think there'll be a US election. They will deliberately get into a war emergency. That's how scared they are of him. That would be the ultimate way.
Yeah, I thought of that too, yeah.
All right, I want to talk
And they're
about...
so devious, these people. They'll stop at Trump is not meant to get his feet under the Resolute desk, and they'll stop at nothing, even if it means exactly what you've just described.
Yeah. All
Or
right.
worse.
Now, another massive gesture from a white government, another chance to say we're very, very sorry for what we didn't do, but maybe our ancestors did. 8% of Western Australia will now be under Indigenous control. Please explain.
Well, I can't. Now, look, reading the story, I thought this is a headline in search of a story, because there wasn't enough, I suppose, meat on the bones. But just a bit of historical perspective. It was back in 1966, 200 Gurindji stockmen at Wave Hill Station, led by Vincent Lingiari. There's now a seat in the Northern Territory named after him. There was a strike, and it lasted for 7 years. And in August 75, Gough Whitlam went up there, this famous photograph of him passing soil through his hands into the hands of Lingiari.
Yeah.
Right?
And Paul Kelly wrote a song about it.
Yeah, he did. That's correct. He did. That's right. And he said words, and I'm reading it here. Vincent Lingiari, I solemnly hand to you the deeds as proof in Australian law that these lands belong to the Gurindji people. So it made for a great photo op at the time. But then I think, well, okay, great photo op, Gough, but what actually happened? What came of all of that? And well, we know the answer. Nothing. It was purely there as a photo opportunity. So if this latest thought bubble out of WA, this latest initiative comes to fruition, I guess we won't know for many years, even decades, exactly how it's going to be borne out. And I've got a few questions about which aren't answered in the story, and there seems to be quite a few reservations by various parties as to whether this goes ahead. It's got to go to Parliament first. So we're talking 8% of WA landmass. That is 20 million hectares, and there's only 12,000 people occupying those 20 million hectares. So we're basically saying, and if I read it correctly, here are the keys of the car. We've screwed this up. You have a go. You drive for a bit, see what you can make of it. But my questions are, and I've made a list here. So assuming everything gets out per the article, the question then becomes one of what does it look like? How will it operate? Who will be in charge? Will there be a constitution? Will there be elections? Will the governing authority be like a PLO? One man, one vote once. Will we see tribal cronyism and corruption, of course, in play? Can the idea be reversed like we did with ATSIC? We abolished it. It was abolished, bipartisan. Or will it be permanent? Will whistle-stop towns and villages pop up with schools and health centres and so on? Will grog be banned? Will they be allowed to develop attractions like hotels and casinos? Will there be interference from city folk and educated Aboriginal elites? What about where environmental and mining issues clash with state and federal governments? Mm. What happens, Chris, and this is the critical one, and I see, so we don't know, is this a form of self-government? Is it a territory like the ACT or a territory like the Northern Territory? We simply don't know. The article doesn't say. But here's the one that bothers me. If it somehow does become a territory or an entity in its own right, what about if China comes knocking with a Belt and Road type initiative, trying to manipulate and gain a foothold with the cargo cult stuff, promises of baubles, bangles and beads?
I bet they have not considered one of your points in making this proposal.
Well, they're just basic questions. What does it? Well, first one is, what does this thing look like?
Yeah.
Let's have a look under the bonnet and check it out.
Yeah.
But none of those questions are answered in the article.
No.
It just, at the moment, it feels like it's a slow news day, and I like Paige Taylor's work, but it's a slow news day. Let's run this up the flagpole 2 weeks out from Australia Day, Aboriginal stuff, blah 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 blah, and just see what comes of it all. But there's questions to be answered.
Now, there's questions to be answered by the Prime Minister about why he has turned his back on Indigenous Australia. Now, this seems to be bubbling under the surface. A lot of people are briefing journalists in writing stories like this. It's not from one individual. There are more than one. And I have a feeling that they are dead set, hurt, and they feel totally thrown under the bus by a government that went to a referendum, all guns blazing, did it badly, by the way, badly in every sense of the word, and now they've just dumped them. What are they doing about closing the gap? They have come up with nothing since that referendum, and the opposition, including Jacinta Price, has come up with a whole heap that should be pursued. Nothing from the Prime Minister.
Yeah. Look, except rhetoric. An example of that. What we want to do, we can close the gap in education, in health and housing. In all of these issues, we have to go about it in different ways. Well, thanks a lot, Sherlock. Everyone would like to see the gap closed, but we've got to get more than just empty rhetoric, and that's what that is. I don't think they know what to do, Chris. I think step one would be to move the bureaucracy from Canberra out into the middle of the Northern Territory. Let them deal with it face to face.
Yeah.
Let them say, well, here are the problems. What are we going to do about it? For the people in remote Australia, this is still 1788 for them. I'm not talking about the rest of the country.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that in the cruel sense. I mean, it's 1788 in terms of nothing's changed. Nothing's happened. They talk about education and housing and health, but okay, you get the education. Where are the jobs? What do they do? Again, like that other story just now. Lots of questions, but nobody seems to have answers.
Yeah. Very true. They don't know what to do. You're exactly right. One last one before we go. The ABC's under fire from Antoinette Latif, who's a media broadcaster who was let go in the middle of a casual stint performing over summer because of posts that she put on social media, which were negative towards Israel. She's taking the ABC on and says it's a toxic environment to work. And a second employee has left the ABC today, right?
That's correct. I'm just looking. I just had it in my hand a minute ago during the ad break. But yes, a second one has decided to pull the pin using exactly the same language. I think she's Lebanese extraction, saying it's a toxic work environment.
Noor Haider, a political reporter in the Parliament House Bureau in Canberra.
That's the one. But look, some of these journalists, Chris, need to get over themselves. This is the DEI stuff. Everything's about race. She was sacked for her social media postings over Israel-Hamas. This is a public broadcaster. So what she's doing now, she's going to the parliamentary body, the government body. What's their name? Doesn't matter.
Some tribunal. There's plenty of them.
Yeah, that's right. And it's all about deflection, saying, like, we know why you got fired, lady, but she's saying, no. It's about race. And it's about my background, my culture, and all the rest of it. It was nothing to do with any of that. No. It was all to do with her social media postings, and it is that simple. It's not complicated. But see, these people are so indoctrinated by their diversity, equity, and inclusion, or their division, their exclusion, and their indoctrination, as I call it, that they can't imagine that their demise couldn't possibly be for any other reason than race.
Yeah.
That's the way they see. That's the prism. And the problem is, this is right through boardrooms now. It's big in America, and it's coming here. Even that Woolies business, that's part of it, I'm assuming. Yep. So we've just got to be so careful of all of that stuff. And we need to get some leadership in both parties, solid leadership who says, no, we're not going to have this anymore. If universities want to go with the DEI, we're going to defund the universities. It's got to be that brutal. Otherwise, this cancer will metastasize.
You've got the last word. I've run out of time. Thank you so much for your time, Jim Ball. We'll catch up very soon. Well, former US President Donald Trump has gone from being praised to being pilloried in the space of 24 hours. After emerging from Iowa victorious, a judge today threatened to kick Trump out of a New York courtroom after he kept making loud remarks during a defamation trial against him. He became the defendant and the heckler. A key to the outcome in November, as I mentioned at the very start of the show today, is going to be what the public makes of his frequent court appearance in between election campaign rallies. Will it remind them of how chaotic his life has been, especially when he was president? Or will it remind them about how Biden weaponised the judiciary to go after him? Let's bring in news and current affairs commentator Jim Ball from Australia on this, and he'll talk about a whole lot more. Jim is a former ratings winner on nighttime commercial radio stations 2UE and 2GB. He is the most politically incorrect commentator we could find in the Southern Hemisphere. We love having him on. Jim, welcome back to TNT.
Well, thank you, Chris. Thanks for inviting me back. I'm waiting for the time when, the phone doesn't ring.
We all know what that's like.
I was going to say we've all been there.
The primaries have begun, Jim, and Trump has come out of Iowa with a great deal of momentum. As foreigners, though, as non-Americans, we see this preliminary battle as an oddity to the Westminster system, don't we?
We do. Just before we get into that, this court case he's involved with, this other court case, first of all the chaos, yes, it's around him, but he's not causing it. This is all caused by the courts or lawfare. So it seems and a whole lot of bogus cases. So you get the impression that, Trump's chaos central, but it's chaos caused by others to bring him down. And this one by whatever her name is, Jean, the rape case in the right, that was mid-90s. I recall when this first happened, she couldn't recall the time of year,
that's right,
the time of day. She couldn't recall anything about it other than something happened in a change room in the middle of the day in a department store. Does that sound even remotely credible to anyone? I don't think it is. But just back on the primaries and just on that one in Iowa, Trump won all but one of the 99 counties, and that county he didn't win. And I was just reading something literally 10 minutes ago. That county he didn't win was because they ran out of whatever they print for people to mark their little ballot or whatever it's called. Now we don't know whether he would have won it, but the point is they ran out of the little docket things. Yep. But just the whole thing is a bit weird to us. We have pre-selections in Australia where Liberal people go along and they vote to pre-select whoever, and you've got to be a member of the party. In Labor, they do similarly, but in America, I think I counted up, there is 24 states, so there's 50 all up. 26 have closed primaries, where only the members of the party can vote, but the other 24 have two kinds of open primaries, where I can be a member of the Labor Party and go along and vote in a Liberal Party pre-selection. Now, I'm sorry, but that's just one of the crazy kinks of the American system. It is truly a bizarre system. But
it's difficult to actually look at a system like this and work out what you're actually getting in the result. Is it a twisted result? Is it an intentionally twisted result by those who don't support the candidates?
Well, look, it's difficult to say now. After all we've seen over the last, since 2016, 17 through to 2020 and so on, it's difficult to know. There's just so much jiggery pokery going, right? Running out of ballots, machines doing dumb things, people being caught on camera, putting ballots through more than once. But on that whole business, okay, Trump won. Looks like he's going to clean up in New Hampshire as well. He's 40 points ahead of Nikki Haley. I think it's about 40 points. Look, she could be a wild card. Who knows? But here's an interesting one that occurred to me this week, and I've written to a couple of journalists about it that I know who have said no. But this is my thinking. And I don't follow the polls, as I've said before, and all the punditry and all the polls and so on, because really they're presuming and they're basically based on a false premise, and that is that Biden will be the candidate. I don't think he will. They've got to figure out a way to bypass Kamala Harris. But when they do that, they're talking about Michelle Obama. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. But here's the interesting one. A couple of weeks ago, and it was not much was said, John Kerry Now, he was a 2004 candidate against George Bush.
Mm.
He resigned from his being the czar of climate change.
Yeah, he did.
He did. And he said he was resigning to go and help Joe Biden with his campaign. But I'm thinking Biden's beyond help. I'm thinking Kerry may be warming up in the bullpen.
Ooh.
If I can use some rodeo type terminology. This is not his first rodeo, let me say that. And he's warming up in the bullpen to come out doing the yeehaw business and sometime later on this year as the candidate. Now, it's a wild idea, I'd give that, but a 2004 redux, I think it's highly possible. Now, let me take it to the next level. John Kerry, the candidate, Nikki Haley, his VP.
Oh,
there you go.
Well, apparently there's a story around today that one of the major donors for the Democratic Party is actually her major donor as well. The name is just...
this is the guy from LinkedIn.
Yes.
Reid Hoffman.
Yes, that's
billionaire.
him. Yeah.
And he's been funding her. Yeah. He's also, now what else was he funding? He funded some really nefarious, and I can't think what it was. I only read about this yesterday. But yeah, look, these billionaires are strange people. I cannot get my head around someone who's made money out of the system, has made America as is, work for them with all the opportunity, but then they turn against it and they're trying to bring it down. I can't get my head around that.
That's interesting. Listen, let's have a look at China now. It didn't take long for the reinvigorated China-Australia relationship to find shaky ground. The Chinese are angry that we have blamed one of their naval vessels for injuring our divers, which of course took place, and because we're supporting free democratic elections in Taiwan. What's emerging here? Has the honeymoon all of a sudden been called off?
Well, look, it's not new. In 2017, I think it was, when Malcolm Turnbull was Prime Minister, China read the Riot Act then as well. They warned us. It was the same old saber rattling we're hearing now. They were warning Australia about upsetting the relationship, and we had to just tone it down and shut up. Otherwise, there'd be all kinds of ramifications. Well, I think to myself, well, what kind of ramifications? What could they possibly do? And of course, you think, well, the supply chains. If they decide that they want to switch off the supply chains, they could do it. Now, It would be a wild step, but it's doable, and they could have a real impact on the way we behave. A bit like, saying, son, you can't drive the car for 3 weeks. You've had a couple of speeding tickets, whatever. They could lower the boom on Australia. But on Taiwan, here it is. I'm just looking down here on my bullet points. China issued an extraordinary warning just prior to Taiwan's presidential election, saying that any miscalculations in Canberra's ties with the Taiwanese government would see the Australian people pushed over the edge of the abyss. That's pretty graphic. Strong words, graphic language, and you think, what? And that's where I'm thinking about the supply chains. And of course, we've got to remember, and a lot of people think, well, Taiwan, who cares? It's 24 million people, island, I don't know how big it is, big as Tasmania, a bit bigger maybe, probably. They are ground zero for the production of chips. Now, a lot of those chips, they're in our cars. I mean, I bought a Nissan Patrol 2 years ago. I had to wait 12 months for it because the chip shortage, right? Now, a lot of those chips are in American armaments, aircraft, tanks, and so on. So if China were to get control of Taiwan, they would get control of, or get a look into, the cockpit of an American aircraft.
It'd be disastrous for the Western world. You're not wrong.
Would.
Now, listen, I want to ask you this. A Sydney Islamic leader who's friendly with former international sports stars Sonny Bill Williams and Anthony Mundine has delivered an explosive sermon in which he prayed to Allah to allow Jews to be killed one by one. That is anti-Semitism writ large. What's he still living there and being able to preach at the mosque?
And why aren't the police And by the way, I think Sonny B. Williams and Anthony Mundine, they were major fundraisers to get the mosque built. And you often find that converts to any religion, always the ones that are really hot to trot with their newfound religion. But you've got to wonder why it is that this kind of language goes on.
Yeah, and is allowed to go on.
And the police do absolutely nothing.
Stinks.
Now, is it because, well, I'm not quite sure why it could be, but by not doing anything at all about it, you're encouraging more of the same. Hey, I got away with it then, I'll keep doing it.
Yeah.
And at some point, and they talk about when they use that word anti-Zionism, let's call it what it is. It's anti-Semitism. They're trying to skirt around it by calling it anti-Zionism. They talk about one at a time. But each of his words, to what extent do they convert radicals one at a time?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is the primary point. One last one for you.
Sure.
What is all the fuss and threat and strike action going on at the ABC? Is this over the removal of that casual radio employee over summer?
It is. She had a 5-gig set of shifts, and on day 2 or whatever, maybe day 1, she went over the top, and she posted stuff on social media that she was warned not to do before her first day. They said, "Do not do this," but she did. And so the ABC, we've got the staff demanding. I mean, who the hell's running the show in there?
Yeah.
And I'm just reading here. ABC staff have also requested management and board members sit with unions to, quote, establish a culturally informed process for appropriately supporting staff who face criticism. Oh, the snowflakes.
Petals.
Attack. Yeah. Now, look, Chris, try this. That's the ABC. Try the same tactic with Telstra, BHP, Reinhardt, Hancock Prospecting, Santos. Good luck. See how you go. Staff demands. It strikes me as, and you may remember back in 2020, the senator for Arkansas, a guy called Tom Cotton, wrote a piece. He was invited to write an op-ed piece in the New York Times, and the staff, and it got published, and the staff went nuts. How dare that be allowed? Now, the poor bloody op-ed editor, guy by the name of Bennett, can't think of his first name, he had to resign. The op-ed was about, basically Cotton was saying that Donald Trump should use the military to suppress the violent protests, coast-to-coast violent protests by Black Lives Matter. And so they protested and they won. They got his scalp. But here's the thing, and the point is that Lateef was sacked because, just like Claudine Gay at Harvard and now Fannie Willis down in Georgia, she thought she could leverage her culture and play the race card under the umbrella of DEI, this diversity, equity, and inclusion, and breach the protocols that she was warned about before she started work. So they're all running for the race card and the culture card.
It does prove one thing, Jim, that the ABC staff in Australia are revolting.
Oh, definitely, in more ways than one. The thing is, with Lateef, then the trouble she's caused, what media outfit is going to offer her a job in the future?
There is that. I've got to run. Mate, thank you very much for your time and your commentary. We love it. Thank you very much.
Chris.
Jim Ball on
Today's News Talk Radio.
Now we're talking.
TNT.
Okay, we've got the gremlins cleaned away. We've got Jim Ball on the program now. Hi there, Jim.
G'day, Chris. How are you?
Doing very, very well. Now, what do you make of this? The CEO of the Australian government's ABC has rejected claims the organisation is biased. He said the reporting of issues related to the Gaza war had been fair and balanced. All yours, Jim. Well,
if it's okay for him to say that it's not biased, it must be all right for me to say that he's deluded, because what we're dealing with here is a clear illustration of cultural capture. With his words ought to be etched in stone. There's no bias at the ABC. I mean, it's been there for as long as I can remember, since this march through that institution started. He's been immersed and marinated in the culture of the ABC for 35 years.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
He's so deep in it, in that bubble, that he cannot see, and he's surrounded by like-minded people.
Yeah.
Both in the terms of location of the ABC, inner city, in terms of the culture of the place. I mean, that Latouche stuff and that piece to camera by, I think it was Bridget Brennan the other day. She's a journo to camera saying it's Aboriginal land, always was, always will be. I'm sorry, these people are activists.
Yeah.
They're not journalists, they are activists. Yeah. And it's in your face. We don't want the world viewed through their lens. We don't want... Rush Limbaugh used to talk about the drive-by media, and that is them, but I took that and added to it to utilize it more broadly. I call it drive-by opinion. That is, people who know nothing, who just think they can toss out their views, their opinions, and have them accepted as holy writ. We just want the news without the spin, without the bias, without the distortion, and we'll make up our own minds. I mean, explain this to me. Only a few months ago, after 9 years at the ABC, his program was called Between the Lines, Tom Switzer.
Mm.
Now, Tom, he resigned from the ABC, and I'm just looking down. His decision was partly motivated by the pressure of being a lone conservative at the public broadcaster. And I'm quoting here from a piece in The Australian from back, might have been October, November, September. Tom's editorial decisions for the show were beginning to upset the sensibilities of some staff and even friends of the ABC, an ABC source told The Australian. It wasn't what his guests would say, but just the mere gesture of giving some people a platform got people offside.
Yeah.
And another source said at the ABC, Switzer had been ruffling feathers at Auntie since he joined 9 years ago.
But even the fact that they would call it ruffling feathers, you mean giving another side of the story. Yeah, it's not ruffling feathers.
Yeah, that's how marinated the culture is.
Yeah.
He dared to give guests who wouldn't usually appear on the ABC the time of day. Now, if that's not an insight into the mindset, I'm buggered if I know what is.
Yeah, I've spoken to Tom about this privately, and I won't reveal what we discussed, but he bemoaned all of this, and he was so upset for the ABC because he has a great respect for the ABC, and he always has, which is why he worked for them. But he gets so discouraged by that kind of bias that he loses all respect for the once great ABC. And they're the kind of things that we discuss quite often. The
barbarians are inside the gate. Now, last week, they're in the US, and I'm sure we don't have the same extent of media as they do there. But the doyen, if you like, one of the left-wing doyens, she's a 30-something, at the New York Times, woman by the name of Taylor Lorenz.
Oh, yeah.
She did a video rant on all of this, and she was berating her own side. And she was talking about the LA Times, the Washington Post. They've all either reduced staff or, in the case of BuzzFeed, closed up altogether. Sports Illustrated, same story. They've just about closed up. So if the ABC is anything to go by, is it any wonder why people are simply tuning out? And so you say, well, okay, Jim, what's the fix? What do you do with the ABC? And, well, let's go to the last thing first. You don't sell it. That's the knee-jerk reaction. I'll tell you why. Why do you say that, Jim? Well, you don't sell it because you don't know who's going to buy it. The first time round, if somebody buys it, it may be a decent sale to a responsible broadcaster. But after that, you don't know who they're likely to flip it to or flick it to.
Yeah.
It could be one of those woke billionaire types, like Michael Cannon Brooks, or one of those. Or who knows, Amazon and what's his name? Jeff Bezos might buy it. Look what he did to the Washington Post. But it's going to take that kind of billionaire money. And from what I assess around the world at the moment, all the billionaires are left wing, which goes back to a comment I made last time we spoke, or maybe the time before that. I don't understand why this is. These people have made their money, their billions off the free market and all of that. Yeah. And they're spending their time trying to drag it down. So there is a possibility, I suppose, that a group linked to the CCP could buy it. You don't know, so that's why you don't sell it. So the two workable options are you make the ABC partially or fully subscription based, right? So you own it, you subscribe to it, it's up to you. But the taxpayer funds no longer contribute to it. You leave the structure in place, but force the ABC. This is option 2. You force the ABC to live within its guidelines. And the third one is and I've been on about this for years, and I think it's the best one. You don't sell it, you don't compromise, you simply make it operate within the bounds of its charter. You put in an ABC czar. Now you get rid of the board, you get rid of the managing director. There's an ABC czar. He goes in there. You don't give him a time limit, because they'll just wait him out. That's how the left operates. He's only here for 5 years or 3. They'll wait you out, and then they'll pick up where they left off. You put all staff, major staff, on, 4-year contracts, 3-year contracts, so that they can't perpetuate their thinking down the line. But it's going to take somebody, and I reckon that the person to do it, if he could do it, would be somebody like Morris Newman.
Oh yeah, who was on the board at one stage.
He was the chairman of the ABC. He's been a businessman, so he knows how business operates. Because he was on the board and chairman, he knows where the bodies are buried and how the ABC operates. So somebody like that, and his charter, whoever it is, would be to hose out the Augean stables, streamline the operations, shut down niche departments and programs, and in this digital age, draft a new set of guidelines. It's the last time there was an inquiry into the ABC, I think, was 1982. That was Malcolm Fraser, just before Bob. I think the report came out between when Fraser left and Hawke came in, but Fraser initiated it. So 1982, that's 42 years ago. And there's been no inquiry into the ABC since. There needs to be one. And having said all of that, who do I blame for all of this? The Liberal Party. Because they are the ones that Labor's never going to do it, because they're on their side. They're to the left. The only people who can affect change and have an inquiry and come back and put in a czar, or whichever way, or whatever they decide to do, is the Liberal Party.
Well, they've never been short of opportunities to do it, but they've never taken it.
I mean, even when you had Janet Albrechtsen on the board, John Howard's best friend, I'm trying to think of his name, he was chairman. And nothing changed.
I want to move on, mate. I want to move on. Now, these stage 3 tax cuts have been cynically used by the Labor government to patch up the hatred that they're copping from Middle Australia. But maybe the highest income earners haven't copped it enough. The Greens don't want high income earners, who are usually employers, of course, to benefit at all, and they're putting pressure on Labor to spread it further. This sounds very familiar, mate. Greens controlling the Labor government.
The puppet masters, that's right. Look, these Happy New Year, Albo, I don't think. As things stand, the tax cuts 1.0, they were legislated yonks ago. And now he wants to change it. But to change them to Albo 2.0, he's got to go back to Parliament. And so the Greens seem intent on leveraging their position to get something more amenable to their economic worldview, to get his revised tax.
As if they have any idea of an economic world.
No, they don't. But the coalition, they want to keep things as they are because it was their legislation. So he needs either the Greens and the crossbenchers or the Liberal Party to get it through. Both of them have counter positions on it. There are Libs. The Libs are opposed to slashing the tax cuts in the high income tax. I think it's $9,000 down to $4,500. That'll be their slice of the pie. They don't want to upset their base. So I guess the whole thing is down to, and I guess with the Greens it'll be a whole lot of okay, we want this on climate change, or we want that. All environmental stuff.
Bet.
So it'll come down to that. I'm sorry. It'll come down to a whole lot of, I mean, political horse trading. The last major political horse trade with the Greens that is affecting us to this day is when John Howard traded nuclear energy in a deal with the Greens back in 1998.
Yeah. And look where we are now. We can't even have a discussion. It's just ridiculous. Now, Rebel News, Jim, is reporting that a vandalised statue of Captain James Cook, and I mentioned this to Brian McWilliams earlier when we were talking about holidays for Christopher Columbus in the United States being scrapped. They're not going to repair him by the sound of it because it's going to cost too much. They're showing very little interest at Yarra City Council. Meanwhile, police have made no arrests either. I guess that's okay if you and I pick up an angle grinder tonight, get out into the streets of Sydney and decide to cut some of these statues down. I guess we'll get through unscathed as well, will we?
Well, look, just back to your conversation prior to the top of the hour, you're talking about neo-Nazis. The police went after the neo-Nazis, rightly so. But they don't spend they don't pursue the Muslim clerics with the same alacrity, the same enthusiasm. And it's the same thing here. What we're dealing with, I think, is a soft revolution, or if you like, I think what they call is not a colour revolution, a velvet revolution. It's a soft revolution. The tactic is one of passive aggression.
Yeah.
It's designed to annoy and to irritate, but it doesn't involve any violence. And it's long term. It's a Gramsci march through the institutions, right? And it's about things like this, removing symbols like statues by any means necessary, including cutting them down, removing traditions like Australia Day ceremonies. I reckon Anzac Day will be on the block. It's a push-pull strategy. In other words, the activists come in and do the dirty deed, but then the local council doesn't replace it. So one does the deed, the other doesn't replace it. And it has the same effect. We have a situation in Britain recently where a cab driver had the British flag on the back of his cab, and he was ordered by the police to remove it because it's divisive.
Oh, stop!
Absolutely, it's incremental, Pete. Chris, people get irate for a few days.
Yeah.
Talkback radio goes into overload.
Yeah.
And then everyone moves until next time. 10 days ago, remember, it was Woolies deciding not to sell Australia Day gear. Then that's another version of it. Yep. Then it's Cricket Australia in a set of, what did he say? A set of weasel words from the head weasel said that January 26th would be recognised, but not Australia Day, right? And so the idea of inclusion under DEI actually means exclusion.
Yeah.
And interesting to note, I don't know if anybody else picked up on this, Woolies and Cricket Australia both have their own in-house Indigenous advisory board.
Yeah.
In other words, it's an internal voice. That's what it is. They have their own internal voices.
And I bet if we were looking at minority groups or any kind of other ethnicity, the main ethnicity in Woolworths stores in some areas of Australia could be Arab, could be Lebanese, it could be Chinese in areas like Chatswood. It could be anything, but you're not going to have a board in Woolworths that specialises in Aboriginal issues. It's so twisted. It's virtue signalling on steroids.
Well, this is how they operate. They can't get it through Parliament. This is like the World Economic Forum. They can't get it through parliaments, so they use external pressure like Blackstone. Janet Albrecht in today's Australian made a point talking about the voice. She wrote, though the government did fail miserably in its constitutional quest, the ugly and bitter campaign did achieve one of its goals. By stirring up anger and division, it energised activists to intensify their fight. The most rancorous Australia Day in history is testament to that. The aim of activists is to make Australia so contentious it will have to be abandoned. Final sentence. Success by the activists will simply perpetuate the division. If a new Australia Day is chosen, the anger of those unhappy with the change will be directed to changing the new date. Division will become permanent. That's true. But this is the way they work. It's all, again, I tell you what they ought to do, Chris, these activists who don't like Australia Day, facts of history are, not my facts, the British arrived here in 1788 and they established the colony, which grew into what we have today. And back in the middle part of the 20th century, there was a Lutheran pastor. His name was Reinhold Niebuhr. And he was the guy that wrote the Serenity Prayer. Grant me the serenity, accept things I cannot
Change,
change, courage to change
the
things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Well, here's something that they can't change. That is the history of Australia. And this is what they ought to do. They ought to accept the things they cannot change and have the wisdom to know the difference.
Very true.
That's my advice to the activists.
Stay there, Jim. Stay there. I've got to go to a news break, and I'm going to come back. One more important issue, and maybe off the back of that, some calls, if I can hear from, especially when it comes to some of these issues from Australia and New Zealand listeners or viewers. 1-800-670-310. Let's go to the newsroom on TNT. Jim Ball, let's just think that it's 2033 and a Labor government comes back in after a period of conservative governance. And the Labor government says, well, we're going to change the date to January the 1st for Australia Day because it upsets too many people. The voices have been too loud on Australia Day. The protesters have been too successful, too destructive. They've upset everything and they take away from our Australia Day. So we're going to move it to January the 1st, which is when we proclaimed Australia as the term it is. That is Australia. So all of a sudden, what happens on January the 1st, Jim Ball? I can tell you right now, we will have the same commotion occur before and during that Australia Day because it's Australia itself they hate the most.
That's right. Look, it doesn't matter what they do. The activists are like water on a stone. It's constant. It just keeps going, and and the whole idea is to wear everyone down.
Yeah.
So, and while we're going about our day, working and doing whatever we do, these people are on 24/7. They never sleep, and you can move it to January the 1st. But then it's like the British cab driver. Get the flag off the back of your cab because it's too divisive. Yeah. Now you've got activists saying, well, Australia Day, it's too divisive. We move it to January 1. There'll be a core of people, probably the majority, because it's always the minority that wins these things. And they'll say, well, that's New Year's Day. We don't want them. We know it January the 1st, 1900 and whatever, 101 or 101. We know about that date, but New Year's Day is New Year's Day, and it's totally different. You need a special day, and I think January 26th is about as good as it gets because that is history.
Yeah. Okay, one final one. There's a story in the Herald and the Age today, and it's rather informative. A high-ranking Home Affairs official, Derek Ellis, who has a little bit of a tussle with his job, but we'll get to that in a second. He says that offshore detention costs are extremely wasteful. That doesn't surprise me. His examples include money spent on training the Nauruan president's dog. Taxpayers pay for that. And $6 million spent on umbrellas alone. Yeah. Now, Ellis has a workers' compensation claim pending, so there's some sour grapes there. But, Jim, he's got to be heard. If this is what we're spending taxpayers' dollars on, how about we do an audit on every single dollar we spend overseas?
Look, as you'd know, there's a saying in journalism called burying the lead, and that is where you take a key or the key feature of a story and bury it in the body of the piece. In this case, the lead or the sting is the very last paragraph. You've got to get right to the bottom to find out what this is probably all about. And I'll read you what it says. Home Affairs has hit back at Elias, claiming Elias's claims that it wasted millions of dollars on services that were never delivered or which should never have been performed. In the Administrative Appeals Tribunal, the department's lawyer accused the senior public servant of giving dishonest or misleading evidence to bolster his claim. So the whole story is about offshore processing, but really this is what it's all about. But just on that, I mean, nothing quite says questionable tasks like spending $6 million on umbrellas and trading the president's guard dog, for God's sake. And I'm sure you don't have to go offshore to find cronyism, corruption, moral and integrity concerns of waste and mismanagement. Yep. It's everywhere. But more broadly, I think Donald Trump, he had this which stopped the border problem that he had. It was his version of offshore. It was remain in Mexico, right? You want to come here, you stay there. If you don't stay there, you're not coming in at all.
Mm.
And that worked.
Mm.
Ours is the same, except ours is Nauru or wherever.
Yeah.
Island around the South Pacific. We've got a Manus Island. We've got a similar system. It's remain anywhere, but not Australia.
Mm.
You want to come here, you do it the legal way. And so more broadly, it works because the message is you come here illegally, you're not going to get what you paid for. You want to use a people smuggler, you're going to an offshore processing center. You could be there for years. And even at the end of all of that, you may not get in at all. So in the case of Trump over there and here, we know what happened. The illegal trade dried right up. Yeah.
Very true. Hopefully America can get back to those days because the record number, I think in December, was 350,000, wasn't it?
Yeah, something like that.
Boy.
It'll be 8 million. And it's deliberate, Chris. This is designed to bring down America.
Yeah.
Economically, to crash the system.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about.
Let's talk about that next time we've got you on the program. Let's talk about that, the border problems that will no doubt impact Biden's re-election. And I have a feeling that America is sick to death of it. But we'll get there next time, Jim. Good to have you on the program.
Thanks so much, Chris.